Bitcoin crashed from the mid 63Ks to the low 61Ks this morning on news that Michael Saylor sold another $216 million of Bitcoin. But I think the market could be misinterpreting what this really means. And so before we break down the hysteria, let's show you a side of the story that I really don't see too many people talking about. And this is coming from a recent Twitter account that I truly have been enjoying. I think they have really good signal right now. So let me read this for you guys, and it becomes very clear. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the price movements and to me, like the irony of what we're seeing happening right now. Anyways, the tweet goes as this: the same people that told you that Stretch was going to zero are now arriving at the completely wrong conclusions about the strategy Bitcoin sale. They have missed the point entirely. This is all about working towards S&P 500 inclusion and a better credit rating for the products. For the first time ever, all 5 of Strategy's preferreds had their dividends paid for by capital raised through the sale of Bitcoin. This has destroyed the, quote, Ponzi narratives and is a clear demonstration of their willingness to sell Bitcoin if necessary. It's also about proving that they can monetize their holdings even during a, quote, Bitcoin stress, words used by the S&P Global back in October when they assigned Strategy their B- rating. No rational person can view this Bitcoin sale in any other way. They have just increased their USD reserves to $2.5 billion. They are not desperate for capital. The truth is, since October last year, Saylor has been doing everything to address the concerns raised by S&P Global. 1, they established a USD reserve, which has improved their USD liquidity. 2, they have paid back some of their convertible debt and made it clear they intend to pay it all back aggressively. And 3, the company continues to demonstrate strong access to capital markets even during. Unfortunately, you will see a lot of misinformation and FUD today, but this should provide clarity amongst all the noise. Bullish on MSTR, and later followed it up with the screen grab. Remember when we got the strategy credit rating, they put this in there. Upside scenario: an upgrade is unlikely in the next 12 months. Over the longer term, we could raise the ratings if 1, we expect the company to improve US dollar liquidity, which they in fact have done, though there was a little hiccups throughout this whole process. 2, Strategy reduces its use of convertible debt, which literally caused the entire kind of argument or the contention going on Bitcoin Twitter. And 3, the company continues to demonstrate strong access to capital markets even during a Bitcoin stress. So look, maybe a lot of people weren't really understanding Saylor's move, which is something that I think I've been pretty transparent about throughout this whole process, that I think a lot of people are obviously misrepresenting or rather misunderstanding exactly what Saylor's moves are. And I've been very adamant about, like, look, you know, I'm not going to claim to know more than a rocket scientist.
I think so. First of all, happy Monday, everybody. I think essentially, like the if we were getting into the nitty gritty of it, like ultimately what happened was it was a marketing blunder, right? Like that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, Saylor built, you know, a huge base, a huge, you know, marketing edge. I would say a huge narrative edge on the never sell your Bitcoin, right? Like that's ultimately what it comes down to. But as I've been saying throughout these many weeks, Saylor is just like the rest of us in this sense, right? Like if you guys remember when you first got into Bitcoin, at least I remember, I was as militant as that. I would say never sell your Bitcoin no matter what. Make sure you have more Bitcoin today than the day before. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And Saylor, as I predicted in October, the capitulation event that I think you would see this market cycle in particular had to do with the Bitcoin treasury companies. And remember when that first sale happened where they announced that they're only selling 32 Bitcoin, I told you guys, I said, this is just a little test so that the markets can digest him eventually potentially having to sell more. And this is the first time that Saylor is selling a great deal amount of Bitcoin. As Opti was pointing out, though, I think that there has been some mischaracterizations. I think as Opti pointed out as well, or potentially alluding to, this doesn't mean that Strategy is in a bad position. They could keep doing this for a very, very long time. They're doing this to fulfill the interest obligations or the yield obligations that they have with their products, right? So as every other bear market that has come in Bitcoin's history, you have these types of events that inevitably happen. The only difference this time is that it relates to the biggest at the moment public company in Bitcoin, which is Strategy. So it has a lot more attention on it, right? And that completely changes compared to the previous cycles where we didn't have a lot of attention on retail capitulating. Like you all knew a friend that was texting you like, bro, I'm selling the bottom. Like I'm over this. Like this Bitcoin's going to zero. I'm focusing on somewhere else. You all had that friend that would contact you, but we didn't have this like public capitulation that I would say is happening. And it's not just Saylor. We saw SecOnes follow in the very similar footsteps. We saw other treasury companies follow in the very similar footsteps. And this is part of the norm. These are how bear markets play out. Like nothing has changed. This is ultimately what you guys have to understand. Nothing has fundamentally changed. This is how bear markets play out. This is how the tourists get flushed out. This is how everyone starts to think that Bitcoin is going to zero, that Bitcoin has no upside left. This is how everyone that is an investor that's not here for the long run, is not here for holding Bitcoin because you believe fixing the money fixes the world. This is how everybody leaves, right? We played you guys that montage of, all these influencer billionaires that were like, listen, like I'm, Bitcoin's over, it's done. Like the potential's gone. It's not really fixing anything. We're going to pivot and we're going to find another shiny new toy. That is those are the exact things that you want to see in a bear market capitulation in order for Bitcoin to get set up for the next cycle. The only difference, as I've been saying, is that it's a lot more public this time. And I would say the only big difference is that Saylor built a whole marketing strategy off of never sell your Bitcoin no matter what, right? And he has to change that strategy, no pun intended, right? He has to change that marketing strategy a little bit. But we've all had, right? If you've been in Bitcoin long enough, you've probably found yourself in a position where you felt overexposed or over leveraged. Don't recommend taking out leverage, by the way. And what did you have to do? You had to sell your Bitcoin. This is just a lot more public. This is just makes a lot more noise. And again, that's precisely because of the marketing strategy that Saylor took when he said never sell your Bitcoin. Opti.
100%. Okay, so let's get into the details here for everyone following along. Here is the tweet this morning. Strategy sold 3,588 Bitcoin for $260 million to fund dividends on our digital credit securities. As of 7/5/2026, we hodl 843,775 Bitcoin in our reserves and $2.55 billion in our USD reserves. Now, remember, we were covering this last week. The whole idea, and I think the market reaction to it, was this idea of, can Saylor pay back the dividends? Or rather, going even further, at what amount of cushion is the market comfortable with? And for a while there, it was around 2 years. Last week, with the latest announcement of the Bitcoin monetization program, they got the entire USD reserves and Bitcoin cap, $1.25 billion of Bitcoin. That got up to around 17 months. Currently, as of this morning, they are now at 17 months or almost 17 and a half months in purely dollars, which I think the markets are reacting a lot more comfortable with this idea. Obviously, they can still sell some more Bitcoin, but in the context of trying to get added to the S&P 500, it does make a lot of sense. Though, in this whole saga in the past few weeks, what we have seen is, I think a lot of people are trading on narratives, and this was like my biggest takeaway before I get into kind of where we currently sit right now. The biggest thing that I find to be interesting with this story is just the irony. I couldn't not look at the irony of the situation. All of last week, we saw Bitcoin price pumping. It was literally green days all of last week. We bounced off like the 57 kind of maybe bottom-ish area, at least local bottom, and we got as high as like 64. All week, we were pumping. And during that whole time, Saylor was selling Bitcoin. And only after the fact, when we found out that he had sold Bitcoin last week, did the markets react a bit negative this morning. Now, if we look at the price, it's like everyone realized, wait, why am I selling this Bitcoin because Saylor sold his Bitcoin last week? Like, nothing is inherently messing with the price right now. And I think that's probably the funniest thing to me throughout this whole thing. Now, obviously, it doesn't matter what I think here. It's really about what do the investors of MSTR and Stretch think. And if you're purely looking at price as signal of those stocks, it seems like the market is a little less freaked out. So here we are with the MSTR stock. It's back over 100. So it looks like the investors at MSTR, the shareholders, are happy about this move. And Bill Miller actually chimed in on this. He goes, shareholders and Bitcoiners alike should actually rejoice that this is happening, aka Saylor selling some Bitcoin. It has major benefits in 1, tax loss harvesting, 2, convincing rating agencies that the asset is liquid and saleable despite the long talk nature of the liability. Now, going further, what is Stretch doing? Obviously, the quote Stretch DPEG, which wasn't really a DPEG, it just kind of hit the lowest price ever around 72. It's rebounding. It's above, almost barely above $90. So again, not only are the MSTR common shareholders happy about this move, but the Stretch digital credit income generating product, they're very happy about this, and it seems to be rebounding here. And
to be specific, fixed income.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's why we need 2 of us here. So you can see, look, the market is less freaked out about this. And again, the irony of it all is not lost on me. Like, Saylor's using Bitcoin as money. Yes, he's selling Bitcoin. Yes, the guy that says never sell your Bitcoin, but he is proving a point to the institutions right now that, hey, Bitcoin is not the quote Ponzi. It's not just a thing that you have to hold on forever. It's something that you can actually use. Yes, there's an intermediary stage right now where you have to kind of sell the Bitcoin for cash, but it's money.
But I think he's proving to Wall Street that
100%
he's willing to sell Bitcoin in order to maintain the Stretch dividend. And I actually saw a really good post by Joe Burnett that was talking about the actual numbers of this and how long Saylor could keep this up, right? So this was Joe Burnett this morning, and he said strategists sold 1.5 months of dividend obligations in 1 week. At this pace, with 0 BTC appreciation, today's dividend obligation is funded until 2056. At 3.4% annually BTC appreciation, today's dividend obligation could be funded indefinitely. So Joe's making a really good point, right? Which is just taking into account that Bitcoin doesn't appreciate, Saylor could do this for a very long time. 2056, right? We're in the year 2026. So that's a very long time, to say the least, right? And just at 3.4% annual Bitcoin appreciation, I think we all expect Bitcoin to appreciate at a much greater rate. Today's dividend obligation could be funded indefinitely, just at a 3.4% annual Bitcoin appreciation. So again, there's 2 opposing camps that I think fundamentally Bitcoiners have a hard time understanding, right? But we've been trying to educate the masses on this, right? There is the public markets, and then there's the Bitcoin community on X. The Bitcoin community on X does not represent the public markets. I know a lot of you guys watching the show participate in the public markets, but it seems like the very loud Bitcoin community on X, I would say, is not representing what the public markets are representing. Because ultimately, what I'm looking at is, what is the price action, right? What is the price action? And the price action clearly indicates that, you know, he made the right move, right? So, you know, it is what it is, right? This is part of, you know, this is part of Bitcoin growing up. I've been telling you guys that, you know, Bitcoin is ultimately going to be adopted by everyone at the end of the day. And ultimately the beauty of Bitcoin is that you can use it as you see fit. That might not completely align with you as a Bitcoiner. You guys know how we feel at Simply Bitcoin. We always advocate Bitcoin in self-custody. That's how you win. We always advocate for it. That's the simple way, right? But Bitcoin is different to different people. Different people are going to use Bitcoin differently, right? And you can't stop them. That's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? It's rules without rulers. So yeah, man. I mean, look, I think this is more overblown than what it should be, just because of his marketing stance. That's my take on all of it.
100%. I would totally agree with that. Now, I do want to, focus on how the market in Bitcoin, the greater market of Bitcoin, reacted, not just the MSTR and the stretch prices. And you can see exactly, I took it off 1 sec. You can see exactly how this worked out if you are zooming in on the 4-hour candle. Where am I at? Here we go. Here is the price action this morning. Actually, maybe I'll go to the 1 day first so we'll zoom out a little bit. All right. So what's the day here? As of Wednesday, we have pumped from about $57 or $57,000 as a low. It's been pumping for a week straight, basically. Well, I guess 5 days. And you can see this candle. This daily candle is the Saylor sold his Bitcoin FUD. But again, as I was saying, he was selling it and the price is still going up. Now, look how the market reacted in this time frame. Here you can see the, oh my God, Saylor sold his Bitcoin. Let me try to short this, or maybe I need to get out. The market completely ate it back up, and we are back to prices that we have never seen in 24 hours.
Yeah, we're back at $63,661, right? And I'll add to that, right? The news of Saylor selling the 32 Bitcoin actually had a much bigger impact on the price than this bigger sell of Bitcoin, which perfectly aligns with my theory that we were talking about earlier, where I basically made the case. I said, he's just testing that, he's indicating to the market that he's going to do this. It's a lot easier to just sell 32 Bitcoin initially,
spook
everybody, and then go out much later with a much bigger sell. And the market's already accustomed to that. The market's already used to that. So that strategy seems to have paid out. Now, we don't know where the price of Bitcoin is going to end up, towards, we don't know where the price of Bitcoin is going to end up, towards the end of the week or whatnot. But so far, it's holding up pretty good. 63,645 Bitcoin, $63,645. I mean, that's pretty darn good. Like,
yeah,
compared
100%.
to the first time, which it was a tiny little sell, right?
And the market's got
and
nuked.
The market literally got nuked, right? So it's a much bigger and different outcome, and I think it was on purpose.
Oh yeah, it's like what's it like? It was like a vaccine in the market. You inject a little bit of the poison into the market, and then let the market react. And then the second time, it's like it was cool. But Nico. It's not a good analogy, but you know what I'm saying. I do want to talk about one last thing before we move on.
We're not saying vaccines are poison. They save a lot of lives.
No, it's okay. That's not what I meant. You put a little bit of the disease in. That's how vaccines work.
Bit of the virus in it. The immune system gets used to it.
Dude, they know what I'm saying. I didn't say all that, dude. I didn't say all that. Okay, dude. Nico's literally clip farming me. He's literally on the show putting me in different contexts. This is crazy. No, Nico. So one final thing I want to talk about, and it's what you've been saying for a while, that what we will see at the bottom of the market is capitulation by the Bitcoin treasury companies. Now, I wouldn't say this is a traditional capitulation like we've seen in the past, where it's like a rage quit. Someone either big blows up or someone rage quits on us. But it could, in some context, be considered a capitulation moment. Just the selling of the Bitcoin.
I mean, I would say,
obviously I'm putting it a little out of context, but
yeah,
I'm trying to see the silver lining. Like, dude, is this the bottom? Did we get the bottom signal?
I would say that this is more of, this is just more part of the symptoms of a bear market more than anything. Like, I think that's what this is showing me. That's what I'm inoculating the market, he said a while ago. Exactly. That's the word, inoculation. This is just more of a symptom of a bear market rather than Saylor in particular, right? Like it happens every bear market, ladies and gentlemen. Like, you have to understand this. Like, this is why the price goes down. People start to capitulate. People start to sell. They start to sell lower than the price and they acquired Bitcoin, right? And then that's eventually when you start to find a bottom. I think we're very close to that. I think we're past the majority of the bear market, in my humble opinion. Now we have to see where the bottom ends up. Are we going to have a final traditional capitulation event like has happened in many bear markets before? Or are we going to hang around these prices? I've been on record saying that if we make it over the summer and Bitcoin stays between 60 and 80K, channels between those two regions, I would say that there's a high probability that that was the bottom. Right. So we still have, you know, I would say another month or two. But if Bitcoin maintains these levels, you could say that, yeah, that was the bottom. And we only had really a 50% correction this cycle, which is completely unheard of. So yeah, we are in uncharted territory. Someone in the comments says tax loss harvesting isn't rocket science. So someone is making the case that this is for tax loss harvesting reasons. That could be the case. I don't know. I would like to say that this is just par of the course. Like I called it in October. I have not changed my stance since October. I would say that the symptoms of this bear market playing out, the capitulations in this bear market that you would see in just the overall Bitcoin market would be specifically Bitcoin treasury companies having to sell their Bitcoin. And that's exactly none of those treasury companies have been immune. So, and that's exactly what we've been seeing play out. But I would caveat that with saying that this is healthy. You need to see this. This needs to happen in order for Bitcoin to reach new highs. You need this type of capitulation. You want the tourists to leave. You want the people that don't believe Bitcoin is an investment to sell at a loss and to leave. You want them to leave. Like, that's nature healing itself. And then that sets up Bitcoin perfectly when everyone forgets about it, when everyone is completely disillusioned. That sets up Bitcoin, historically speaking, literally on a rocket pad ready for blast off. And I think this time next year, I would be extremely surprised if we weren't above 100K again. So, you know, I'm personally excited. We've made it through the worst parts. In my humble
allegedly
opinion. We've made it through. We've made it through some of the worst parts, and now we're set up. We're set up to you know, for Bitcoin to blast off again, like it always does, historically speaking. Listen, the math is the math, right? It's infinity divided by 21 million. Bitcoin is the scarcest asset the world has ever seen. It's simple. It's not that complicated. So that's my take on all this. I think it's just more noise rather than signal, in my honest opinion. Now,
well, I think the price action literally confirmed that by like the dip on the news coming out of him selling completely eaten up within a few hours. It's like it's obviously not a big deal.
100%. Guys, we have an incredible show lined up for you guys today. We're going to be talking about property rights. We're going to be talking about the Clarity Act. We have the executive chairman of HIVE Digital Technologies, Frank Holmes, and we have the of Satoshi Action Fund, Dennis Porter, joining us on the show later today. And we're going to be talking about property rights in the United States. We're going to be talking about how important property rights are to individuals, and we're going to be talking about where is the Clarity Act as it stands, and also all the political dynamics that's going into this. This is a midterm year after all. I suspect a little bit of the delay on the Clarity Act is more so a political move that's being made, right? So they're playing a kind of like this rear guard action where essentially, you know, the minority is taking advantage of the fact that they have leverage, and they're essentially playing the waiting game. Let's see if it plays out to their favor. But anyways, it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Also, we have a numbers clip for you guys as always. It's going to be a great show. You guys are going to want to stay tuned in. You're shaking your head. I don't know what that means.
I don't have a clip. We're going to talk about the inflow, ETF inflows.
We're going to talk about the inflows.
They're finally back.
That's actually a really good topic to talk about. So the ETF inflows are finally back, right? And this has been 6 months of them essentially bleeding. So the ETF inflows have reversed course. I think that's another good sign. So anyways, it's going to be a great show, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys are enjoying it so far, make sure to smash that like button. It's going to be a hell of a show packed with incredible content, great guests. You're not going to want to miss it. We're going to be right back just after the very, very quick break.
Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent, straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own. Paper burns, paper floods, paper fades. If your seed phrase is written on paper, it's not really backed up. It's waiting to disappear. Stampseed's DIY kit lets you hammer your seed words directly into commercial grade titanium. Fireproof, crush-proof, waterproof, and permanent. Once your words are in the metal, they aren't going anywhere. Use code SIMPLY at stampseed.com for 15% off anything in the store. That's stampseed.com, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, we are back. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $63,830. Block height, 956,941. Market cap, 1.28 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 4.25%. Decline from all-time high. We're down 49.4%. So if you're buying Bitcoin right now, you're getting it at a 49.4% discount. I would take advantage to buy the dip. That's what I would do. Opti, what are we talking about today?
Yeah. So sorry, guys, about the audio. I don't know what happened. I guess it just... I think it might have been my computer. It started freaking out. So anyways, here we go. Let me get this up for you guys. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. All right. So at covering for a couple of weeks now, whoa. All right, you're gonna have to. There we go. We've been seeing a lot of outflows from the ETFs, and for a long time, I hate to do this. You know, you guys yell at me all the time when I do this, but like the boomers that were holding the ETFs, they had some diamond hands. You know, they were holding pretty good until we started to see the SpaceX IPO. Obviously, we've seen, I wouldn't even necessarily call it a prolonged bear market, but once we got closer to the bottom, we did see, a lot of outflows coming from the ETFs. So finally, we've seen a little bit of a turnaround here. So we saw Walter Bloomberg this morning tweet, Bitcoin ETFs see first inflows in weeks. The U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs recorded a $223.5 million net inflow on July 2nd, the first since June 12th. Bitcoin briefly, of course, climbed up to 64K over the holiday weekend before pulling down. And as we saw right now, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the ETF buyers also step in and get this price back up to 63.5. Now, obviously, the numbers are pretty interesting considering that Saylor sold basically the same amount of Bitcoin last week. The ETFs are finally back online, and it's something like a trend that we've been watching here recently. We're not saying, the selling exhaustion is complete. We're not saying it's finally the end of the bear market, but what we are seeing is that it does feel as if the bears in control, the market makers in control right now, are on their last gasp. As Glassnode tweeted here, Bitcoin's easing into consolidation. The selling has cooled. Futures longs are piling back in, and option traders aren't as spooked about downside anymore. ETF outflows are drying up too. Hot capital's creeping back through, or creeping back though, which could stir up volatility even as profits climb. So again, now I know everyone is not the biggest fan of the on-chain metrics per se, and obviously also the ETFs. I know a lot of people really don't like the ETF, but again, what we have seen is that the ETF wrapper, Saylor, Stretch, and the Bitcoin treasury companies have opened up Bitcoin into new capital markets in the sense of new investors are now willing to invest in Bitcoin. Maybe those before didn't want to buy spot, further couldn't buy spot Bitcoin. Whoa. All right, we're having all kinds of issues over here. I lost my train of thought. Even though a lot of investors either weren't comfortable buying spot Bitcoin or further weren't allowed to buy spot Bitcoin, as we see, and as we're going to talk about in a minute, on the verge of potentially the Clarity Act actually getting put into law, we are seeing that the institutions do have an appetite for Bitcoin. They maybe got spooked a little bit. They might have been chasing the IPOs. Maybe they were just feeling some pain because Bitcoin's down 50%.
Bro, in my house,
but honestly, it looks like they're coming back on board.
In my opinion, like, you know, guys, like ultimately, everyone has to pay their price of tuition. That's what it comes down to. Like, every successful Bitcoiner that I know that has materially benefited in terms of wealth from Bitcoin has been a Bitcoiner that has spent time in the market and not timing the market. What does that mean? That means that they've held. They've held as long as they've humanly possibly could. And that doesn't mean that you've made it to the finish line with the entirety of your stack. Maybe you sold some along the way, you know, to upgrade your lifestyle or whatever. But the people that I know that have grown enormous wealth holding Bitcoin have been the ones that have held Bitcoin for 10 plus years. Those are the people that I know that have really, really fundamentally changed their life. And again, it's not because they were timing the market. It's because they've spent time hodling. And not only hodling, they've been slowly dollar cost averaging every single day. I've bought every top and I've bought every single bottom. I've bought the 2021 top. I bought this top I actually didn't buy. But I was buying Bitcoin above 100K. And it's just part of the course, right? So I don't think Wall Street is any different here. You know, Bitcoin ultimately is a protocol that no one can control. The rules are equal for everybody. Everyone equally benefits. No one has, insider, knowledge or privilege here. It was mostly the grassroots that were benefiting from Bitcoin initially, the people that believed in the protocol initially that, kept it alive. They're the ones, as Saylor calls them, the fundamentalists. They're the ones that held the line and said, "Hey, listen, you want to sell me Bitcoin at $300 after we came from an all-time high of 1,000 something? Sure, I'll buy it from you, no problem." This cycle's no different. It's just a lot more public, the people that are capitulating, and it's public because by definition they're public companies, so it's everything that they do is on the public record, and you kind of find out, right? So on Saylor's side, it's no different. But I will say this: Bitcoin bear markets are for building, and the most awesome Bitcoin companies right now, they're not paying attention to any of this. They're not paying attention to the price. They're not paying attention to, the noise. What they're doing is that they're building. They're building like crazy. And that's exactly what they're doing. And that's what you guys should be focused on. Anyways, right after the break, we have the one and only executive chairman of HIVE Digital Technologies. We have Frank Holmes in the house who's joining us. And we're going to be talking about the Clarity Act, the importance of property rights. So we're going to be right back just after the break. Here we go. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like Bitkey and I recommend it to my friends and family. Bitkey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life, not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing, and no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about Bitkey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in, inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new Bitkey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got the one, the only Bulldog Holmes, Frank Holmes, Executive Chairman of HIVE Digital Technologies, joining us on the show today. Frank, happy Independence Day. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us, Frank. Frank, Dennis is going to join us in about 5 minutes or so. We've been talking about this subject, the importance of private property rights, just for humanity as a whole. How important is it? How important is it for a society to function? How important is a society for it to be free? And it's very fitting, specifically when Independence Day just happened over the weekend.
Yeah, and I think I shared with you an interesting commentary by data center immigrants that are now in America, and a couple have PhDs, and how they love America because it was first fought for freedom and then independence. It's the only country in the world and where private property rights still have tremendous value. And what we have seen in the research is that whenever you take away private property rights, you take away human rights. And you saw this in Venezuela in this century. We saw it in Zimbabwe. We've seen it in many places.
Absolutely. And you know, that is so important, right? How private property rights coincide with human freedom, how important it is to protect private property rights. And talking about America specifically, America is seen, you know, as a first generation American, you're coming to this country, it's seen as the bastion of freedom, right? And a big portion of that is the fact that the government itself protects the right of citizens to own private property. It's so important. It's part of the American dream. And I would go on a limb and say, you know, specifically if you come from another country, if you're from the United States, I don't think you completely truly appreciate how privileged you are compared to the rest of the world in terms of the freedoms that this country provides you compared to, you know, the rest of the world. As I said, it's very unique to the United States, and I think it's something that you only truly experience if you're immigrating to this country, and it's something very unique to this country. Frank.
Clearly, and you can see what happened in Venezuela this century, where as soon as private property rights were taken away, human rights were taken away. It allows for a Maduro to come in. And we saw this also in Argentina, where they took away all your US dollar bank accounts. And I think that these are classic examples or what's so important about Bitcoin ecosystem is it protects your financial freedom and therefore protects your human rights. And I think what we're still seeing is the far left fighting this. And in many countries that we deal with, we've seen where they weaponize the tax agencies to make up their own rules to go after the industry. And then you say, okay, well, where did they get that idea from? It came from their central bank. And where did the central bank get it from? It came from the Bank of International Settlements. And so you can see the cause and effect and possible ramifications. And we're seeing today in America, Bitcoin is under stress from a year ago, and a big part of that is this continuous sentiment battle. And so this now is the Clarity Act. And Elizabeth Warren is doing an incredible job. She's very smart, but she's stalling innovation. She is stalling your liberties and your rights with this attack on anything that's Bitcoin. And so I think that that's what we're witnessing, and because Bitcoin has become such a global multi-trillion-dollar industry that has become now political.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank, a question for you, because one of the things that they keep saying as to why the Clarity Act should not pass is they're talking about investor protection. Is it really about investor protection, or is it just about political leverage, Frank?
We're in a gubernatorial election year, and so now it becomes politics. So if they can use anything against President Trump, then they will use this. And this being weaponizing is ethics. So they could have easily passed anything if they want more ethics around it, but it's being weaponized is to delay the Clarity Act. And we have the banks behind it lobbying because they're especially paying interest on your stable coins.
Yeah, and that was a big, that was the big topic of conversation, right? Because there was all of these things that were coming in together, and which is specifically the news that was released regarding Trump's exposure to Bitcoin. And then there was, news released regarding Kash Patel. Then there was news released regarding the what was it specifically? There was news released regarding the Jamie Dimon's comments, specifically that were, regarding Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. So it was all of these forces, kind of coming together. And it seems like the Republicans are spending a lot of political capital combating those narratives rather than actually focusing on getting the Clarity Act across the finish line. It seems like there's a lot of energy that's being spent combating against these narratives rather than actually getting the bill across the finish line.
Correct. And sentiment affects the quant world. And sentiment factors, so I know from as a money manager, having my ETFs, my mutual funds, etc., that you have to create sentiment factors to build your cash. So things become overbought, oversold, something negative comes out. So anything that's geopolitical in other countries will immediately have an impact on a commodity or a stock in that other country. And right now, what we're witnessing in the past 6 weeks is a real push where poly market, etc., we're predicting there was a 70% probability to close the Clarity Act now to 26%. So that's a negative sentiment. And that affects people redeeming. And that creates a domino effect that we've seen now for this year, this date.
Absolutely. Joining us on the show today as well is Dennis Porter. Dennis Porter is the CEO of Satoshi Action Fund. Dennis, welcome to the show. Frank and I have been talking about the current status of the Clarity Act and then the importance of private property for individuals' freedom. Dennis, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, glad to be here, guys. Looking forward to the conversation. Always good to see the both of you. Deep in a bear market. As you said, bear markets are for building earlier. So we're certainly doing that at Satoshi Action as we speak.
Absolutely. So, Dennis, you've done a tremendous amount of work. Go ahead, Frank.
I was just saying it's great that Dennis is able to come on because Dennis is deep in Washington, D.C., and he has much more granularity and color than I have on the workings of what's going on. But I think, Dennis, where the whole conversation started with Nico and I, is about sentiment factors affect quant funds, and they have many different sentiment factors, and they move big markets, and the leverage they use are often 10 to 1. So you can have this amplification take place, and sentiment, something negative like the Clarity Act not getting pushed through, immediately bids start getting filled. Then all of a sudden you get redemptions, and people are saying, what happened? And so it's so good that you come on the program to give us what you know deep in the heart of geopolitics in Washington.
Yeah, happy to be here to give you guys an update on where things stand with Clarity. Certainly, it is a piece of legislation that a lot of the industry and the ecosystem has been looking forward to for some time now. It is getting down to the wire, though. I mean, to be honest, it's really sort of incredible to witness up close and personal, despite the frustrations around getting it across the finish line. It is one of those things that you don't get to witness very often. There's a lot of different issues that they can focus on in Washington, D.C., where your issue is competing for attention, from the other issues that are going on in the country, everything from a war in Iran to what's going on in Israel, to the Ukraine war, to, affordability here in the United States. They've got a big housing bill that they passed in the House and the Senate. Trump's holding that up. Trying to get the Save America Act bill passed for the voting component. So there's all these different competing issues that this administration has made a priority. Crypto certainly is one of them. But when you work in the policy space, you don't always get to live in these environments for your whole career, where the thing that you care about is the thing that is one of the most important issues to the current administration. So much so that they, have already passed the Genius Act, and we're really waiting to see what will happen in the Senate on Clarity. There's really I would say there's three big issues, but it's predominantly two big issues. One is the BRCA language, which is the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, Section 604. That's the language that allows for an open source developer, if they create open source code and someone uses it for a crime, that they won't be liable. Proponents of that law say that it's super important proponents of that provision within the bill believe that it's necessary to protect developers. That's a good argument for that. But you have this pretty strong resistance from law enforcement and from Catherine Cortez Masto, who goes by CCM in the Senate. She's a former AG, former law enforcement. She comes from law enforcement community. And there's been a lot of lawmakers and also law enforcement agencies and also associations that have come out against these provisions in the BRCA. Now, a couple of them recently, some pretty good news on that was a couple of them recently. One went to neutral and one is now in support, but there's a whole body of them that are still in opposition to it. So that's probably arguably the most important component, because a little known fact here in DC is there's a lot of DeFi groups, and they sit on a lot of the boards of a lot of the different groups, and they're very influential. They play their cards really well. And so I don't think Clarity gets done without it. Like, there needs to be something in there for them. They have a lot of influence in the space. But if you don't get the Dems on board with something like some sort of change, or if CCM doesn't get on board with, language changes, then you might lose a lot of the Dems that you need in order to get this bill across the finish line in the Senate. The second one, of course, is the one that's more popular, I should say, or more in the zeitgeist, which is the ethics provisions. And, Donald Trump's recent, 900 plus page financial disclosures, where he showed that he made more money than Coinbase, it certainly isn't helpful, especially as a lot of investors in the space, people that are just putting $1 in to try to make a second dollar, aren't doing so well, right? A lot of us believe in the long term. I've been here same as Nico and others for multiple bear markets, so it doesn't really faze me. But a lot of people that are new to this space are sort of like, eyes wide open, like, wow, the Trump family has made $1.5 billion off crypto, and nobody else is making money except for companies that might be generating revenue off of like their trading, which is like Coinbase, and they made more money than Coinbase. So that's certainly put a laser pointer on that issue. But there's ongoing negotiations. Senator Gillibrand and a few other senators in the Senate that are Democrats are operating, I think, in good faith to try to get something done on ethics. The White House has said that they are willing to do something on ethics as long as it doesn't target just the Trump family alone. So it's going to come down to the finish line. I think it's going to be, CCM needs to finish up with what she wants, and hopefully there's an agreement there on the BRCA language. And then after that, it's really down to the White House. It's down to Trump making a decision on what is he willing to give up, and is that enough to get Democrats on board to pass Clarity in the Senate.
So Dennis, while you and I, we had a fantastic interview with Senator Lummis in DC, and we were talking about the importance of bipartisanship, right? At the end of the day, if you want to get something through the Senate, you need that 60 vote threshold, right? And the Genius Act barely, I was texting you behind the scenes. I was so happy when the Genius Act passed, and I was texting Lummis's team as well. But it's so important to get to that 60 vote threshold, and the Republicans only really hold 53 Senate seats, and a lot of those aren't necessarily, voting along party lines. So let's talk about the importance of bipartisanship in all of Bitcoin/crypto regulation, especially moving forward, because the last thing that we want to see as a community, as an industry as a whole, is this pendulum swing between administrations, right? Because at the end of the day, I truly believe that regardless of where you stand on an ideological level, Bitcoin helps you as an individual, right? So, Dennis, have we made any progress on that front?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the viewpoint is because of the last admin that Democrats are anti-crypto. It's always a leadership problem when it comes to this issue, because there's nothing inherently partisan about Bitcoin or really even really crypto writ large. But because of the Gensler, and Biden administration, which, really was a Senator Elizabeth Warren project. Elizabeth Warren, in the lead up to Biden winning the presidency, made a deal. This is like an open secret in Washington, D.C., that she made a deal with Biden so that she would support him, but then she would get to play a major role in domestic policy. So a lot of domestic policy was left up to her and her people, particularly crypto. And Biden played more of a role on the sort of grander scope and also on foreign matters. And so because of that, this last administration, people think like, oh, well, Biden was like a moderate. Why was he so anti-crypto? Maybe Democrats are anti-crypto, but really, in a way, in a weird roundabout way, it's really just a bunch of Elizabeth Warren people that were in this administration, unfortunately. But those deals are made. Those deals are made. Now we have the opposite happening, right? Where Trump, and even today he said that he liked supporting crypto, not just because of the opportunity. He also saw there was a political opportunity. He said, he said it quite literally out loud. But that really encouraged him to be super supportive of it. And he did get a lot of support from the crypto industry, probably more than any president will ever have, simply because we were in this position where we felt like we were under attack. And now he was willing to come in and try to stop those attacks. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next administration. And I don't think that we'll ever have a more pro or a more anti dynamic when it comes to crypto. I think it was about as bad as it could get with Gensler and some of the Warren people being opposed to the technology. And as far as making it a priority, you probably won't get much better than Trump. Now, you could argue that some people argue that if Clarity doesn't pass, was he a net negative on crypto and Bitcoin because of the fact that his family made so much money and, sort of made it look like he was extracting more than he was applying value. I think that really is like sort of TBD. We'll have to watch to see how things play out. But if Clarity doesn't get done, that's a major problem, because it probably won't get done for. It's probably not going to get done in 2 years, in the next 2 years, if Dems take over, especially if they take over the Senate, because Elizabeth Warren will be the chair of banking, which is the most important committee when it comes to this type of regulation. It's possible that if Brown wins, former Senator Brown out of Ohio, lost because of the crypto industry, he might get a seat back in this election. And in theory, Democrats may say, well, he technically is more senior, even though he was gone for one term or half a term. So we're going to still put him back in to be chair of banking. He was part of the Elizabeth Warren camp for a while, but then eventually he kind of like, people are saying he's kind of softened on it. But I mean, I don't know if an industry takes you out and then you come back into Congress, like, I don't think you're necessarily going to be like buddies with them, but people argue that he would be better than Elizabeth Warren. So big TBD on all that. For sure.
So Frank, a question from you. From a capital markets perspective, what does uncertainty in regulation do to Bitcoin miners, exchanges, and public companies trying to build in the space?
Hit the bid and get out.
Frank, you've spent decades in gold, commodities, and global markets. Is this the kind of political blockade? Have you ever seen something like this before?
Yes, I have, and really, I'm sorry, I'm in an airport, I'm on my way to fly to Vancouver to watch Columbia play. So last minute flight for this interview, but my wife being Colombian, we definitely had to go get a chance to watch the game. So I apologize, I'm in an airport. But I really think what's important here is, and I asked some of my young analysts in marketing and money management, and they didn't know who Saul Alinsky was. And, and, and I said, well, that should be number 101, because Hillary Clinton studied him, Obama studied him, and how he was able to have grassroots. And in fact, I was always impressed with Bitcoin's ecosystem growing almost at the beginning, like Saul would promote his agendas. And both of you were very cognizant and aware, but if we have young listeners on the call, they should go to ChatGPT and learn about how this guy weaponized using grassroots campaigns to create change, empowering people that have no power. And it's very grassroots. So my big question here to Dennis is that should people have to be professional and polite, but reach out to their Congress people, whoever is in their state or their riding an area, and send an email, make a phone call to encourage getting the Clarity Act pushed through. That would be a grassroots movement. And this program can also be a methodology to ignite a grassroots.
Absolutely. And also one of the things straight from one of Saul Alinsky's books, Rules for Radicals, ultimately make them live up to their own rules. Ultimately, and with Bitcoin, you have that, right? Like ultimately, it's very difficult to attack, right? Like if you fully understand what Bitcoin does, specifically for low income people or the middle class, it protects your savings from the ravages of inflation. Once you're educated on that subject matter, it, regardless of the political ideology of the political opponents of Bitcoin, make them live up to their own rules. Make them explain in public why they are against Bitcoin, because I think what they're leveraging, what they're taking advantage of, is low information voters that perhaps got affected by this recent bear market action, and they're associating Bitcoin and crypto with that negative experience that they had without really paying attention to the problem that Bitcoin actually solves. So that's a rule straight from Saul Alinsky's book. I highly recommend reading the book. It's fantastic, especially if you're kind of into political tactics and such. But Dennis, me and you have spent countless hours talking about this online. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of how Satoshi Action operates. I certainly took in Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals book, amongst many other pieces of legislation and books out there that you can read that will really help you better understand how to be effective in the political space. But I wouldn't say that I copy Saul Alinsky, but his work certainly has influenced how we function as an organization. And we've always been about the bottom-up approach. I mean, we've helped grassroots advocates send over 300,000 letters to every single lawmaker in this country has received a letter from us or from one of our advocates. And that can be very effective. In fact, it was funny when during the last admin, I can't actually, I think it was the IIJA. It was during the broker amendment process. We just started to launch this tool that we were using to help people write letters quickly. And so many letters were coming in that people in DC, because I hadn't moved there yet. I moved here in November to sort of be more active during this current administration. But before I'd moved there, I was just doing it from my home in Oregon. And I was hearing from people in DC, and they were like, stop sending so many letters. Like, they're actually getting upset with how many letters are being sent. And I had never heard that before. And I thought that was incredible. We decided to send a few more and then dialed it back a little bit. But we've continued on trying to make sure that people stay engaged, not only through writing letters, but also helping them show up to testify, because there's nothing more impactful than showing up in politics. Nothing even comes close to just showing up. Writing a letter, as Frank said, is super important. Doing it by email can actually be very effective. Handwritten is fine, but you just got to know that it can take a while to get there. It can take like a month. Has to go through a screening process, and obviously the mail is a few days slow itself. But writing letters, whether by physical or virtually, is great. Showing up in person to testify, showing up in person to have a conversation with your lawmaker is great. The big thing also too, and me and Frank were talking about this a little bit via email, is also being respectful. Like if you come in and you're like,
Absolutely,
flipping the middle finger and telling them they're an idiot and that they, are corrupt or whatever it is, right? Even, and I'm not saying this is true, but even if that were true, that's still not a good idea, because then they start to view you as like an enemy in opposition. And you just got to think that like these lawmakers are inundated all the time, constantly getting engagement. And if you come in respectfully and you say like, hey, this is my viewpoint and we're going to fight and we're going to care about this issue, that's going to get you a lot further than coming in trying to burn it down. Now, the place where burning it down can sometimes be helpful is voting. If you really think this lawmaker is not representing you the way that they should be, get out there, help people to sign up to vote, get people registered, support your candidates that you care about financially. It does make a difference. In fact, like, everyone always thinks like nowadays with all the money in politics, which is a problem, of course. And I think Citizens United is a major part of that problem. But like there's a minimum amount of money you need to be able to be effective. Like take the Harris versus Trump campaign. Like Harris outraised Trump. She had way more money than Trump in this last election, and Trump still won. So it's not always about like you need more money than your opponent, but you sort of do need to hit like a bare minimum threshold to be able to continue to have your ads being played, to be able to continue to have staff that supports you in the election. So keep that in mind. You don't need to outraise the opponent, but they do need to have that minimum support. And if you find someone that you think is viable, supports your issues, and they just need a little bit more money to get them across the finish line, those small dollars can actually make a big difference for those candidates. But I wanted to go back to one thing you said earlier too, and I didn't quite close the loop on it, which is the bipartisan component. I really do believe that Bitcoin is bipartisan and that we're going to see an increase in that. We're seeing more and more and more than ever, especially as we get away from the last admin and the way that it operated, that more Democrats are willing to come out and be supportive. I mean, 18 Democrats in the Senate went over with Republicans to vote in favor of Genius. 70 in the House went over when they voted for clarity in the House, which did pass, and it's passed through the House. So there is this and that's during a very divisive time. It's very divisive right now. People are like at each other's throats. Like there has never been probably a more divisive time in modern American politics. I don't want to say ever, because obviously, you go back to the Civil War, that's probably a little bit more divisive. But this is the most divisive time in modern American politics. And for Democrats to be crossing the aisle to vote on something that's a priority for the Trump administration, that's a pretty big deal to show that there is bipartisan support for Bitcoin and crypto writ large. I know that was a stablecoin bill, but it is really sort of this growing interest in the entire space that I've been seeing.
And I would just add the stable coin, from my experience in mutual funds. The real growth of mutual funds came from money market funds. When they deregulated and banks couldn't pay a high yield, but money market funds could, billions of dollars went into money market funds. And then the Fidelities of the world and the Vanguards cross-sold those investors getting a higher yield into equity. And that was the big unleashing. So the Stablecoin Act will be very beneficial for Bitcoin, because more people will turn around and say, I want to have both assets. I want to have the stability, I want to yield, and then I'll turn around to go look at Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining companies, etc. So it does create a positive contagion to create clarity over stable coins and to actually pay a coupon, buy credits or whatever you want. That's
Absolutely.
my opinion as as a guy that has 36 years experience in America's 40 Act for mutual funds and ETFs.
I wanted to just respond real quick to someone in the chat, as Patrick was saying, like, I don't agree that, that he's at the protest show, you don't agree, a riot shows you don't agree and can do something about it. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't protest. I'm not saying that there are not times for that type of behavior, but if your plan is to go in and try to like change hearts and minds, like try to actually get someone on board with you, like that's when you be polite. Yes, there are time for protests. Yes, there are time for mass demonstration. And I absolutely agree that that's necessary. You should just think about them as different tools for different times, depending on where you are in the dynamic. The other one too, there was another comment. Someone said, 908 said horrible bill. Hopefully it won't pass. There is actually quite a bit of number of people that believe that. It's Washington, D.C. though. You're lucky if you get a 7 out of 10 here. That's kind of the way it works. Shoot for the moon. If you miss, land amongst the stars. I do agree that there needs to be quite a bit of work done once clarity passes to improve it. It's not in a bill that I'm extremely excited about. I'm more excited about just like getting it down, getting the foundation down, and like moving on. Let's move on to the next phase of the regulatory space. If we have to start over, I mean, you're talking, it could be like a decade that goes by before we get another shot. So you just have to weigh those dynamics. Is it worth waiting a decade? Hard to say. I mean, a lot of people would probably say no, but it definitely is not a perfect bill. That's for sure.
So let's take some of these rules from Saul himself. One of the rules I'm going to mention is keep the pressure on. And if it's something that your people enjoy, it's a very good tactic, right? So let's apply those 2 rules for this specific call to action. We have over 1,000 people watching across the platforms, and tens of thousands will watch this recording. Dennis, what is the call to action here? What can people specifically do to help the Clarity Act get across the finish line?
Yeah, there's 2 real big things. You know, one is if you want to see it pass, there is going to be a big, how do I put this the right way? There's going to be an inflection point. There's going to be a crossroads that appears where there has to be a decision made. It's probably going to be around ethics. And what we want to see is an agreement between the White House, and we want to see an agreement between the Democrats. And so, like, when that starts to happen, I think the worst thing that everyone can do is be like, no, we don't need this. This is just Democrats trying to destroy clarity. Certainly some of them it is, but not the ones in good faith negotiating, because you have to have it. I mean, you will not get to 60 votes without it. There's just no way, because Democrats, in order to vote for this bill, they have to be accountable to their voters. And their voters right now are looking at crypto going, this is just one giant Trump grift. Like, that's just the way their voters think, you know? And so in order to get their voters to feel comfortable, they have to have some sort of provision in here. What is acceptable to their voters might be very far away from what is acceptable to the White House, who has already said they're willing to do something. But just, you know, I would say that it would be counterproductive to jump into this thing and say, oh, we don't need ethics. Like, get rid of that. This is just a Democrat agenda thing to kill clarity. But on the opposite side of the coin too, like, we also got to monitor that situation to make sure that we're pushing the White House and saying, like, yeah, we agree something should be done here. Like, I don't think anybody thinks it's a great idea that future presidents launch meme coins like on the night of inauguration, make a bunch of money for themselves, and everybody that invested in it has lost money. Like, that's just not a good look. So I would avoid being like hyper partisan about it, because it's just something that has to happen, in my opinion. Write your lawmakers, let them know that that's the best way to be effective, or visit them in Washington, D.C.
I think the question really is, Dennis, that I would ask you is, what should people do? I'm a Bitcoiner. What should I do? Should I write, what type of letter should I write in? Yeah. You mentioned earlier, well, what is the strategy to create awareness for the politicians that you care?
Yeah, writing letters is huge. I mean, people really don't underestimate it. I think writing a well-structured, short, you don't want to go too long. I mean, these poor staffers, they read every single one of them. Like, just get your points dialed in, what you think needs to happen.
So what say you want. What would be the suggestion for me to write a letter that you think would be that we support the Clarity Act, period, or give more reasons why?
I mean, yeah, for me personally, if it was me writing my own letter for myself, I would say that, you know, I like this bill, that it needs to get passed. We need the regulatory protections. We need to have that base layer of rules for the road. We agree, you know, I agree that there needs to be some ethics provisions in here to make sure that future lawmakers, I don't even think it should just apply to the president. I think it should be any lawmaker. I mean, we're getting into the world of like banning lawmakers from, you know, doing insider trading on stocks. I agree with that also. So like, I'm perfectly fine. I totally agree that lawmakers shouldn't be using crypto in a way that's beneficial to themselves. Just like I don't agree that it's okay for lawmakers to be doing insider trading. So that's a big component to me. I think the BRCA language, you know, I support it in ethos. Like, I like it. I think it's good, but also at the same time, like, carte blanche, giving away the ability for anybody to develop something and never have any responsibility, no matter how it's structured, is not right. I think you got to be really careful about the definitions. You got to be really careful about how these things are written down, because they will be litigated. And that's kind of the concern from lawmakers. Like, I don't have a big concern with the way that it's currently written, but I can appreciate that people would be concerned about it, because there is a lot of bad actors. Like, when you're in the political space like me, you see the bad actors every day. They're everywhere, all the time. And I know there's a lot of great actors doing good work. Companies like HIVE, companies like Simply Bitcoin, doing great work. But there are people that are like willing to take advantage of any edge they can get. And that's where I think these people are concerned about what's going on with the BRCA. And that's my concern as well. You know, make sure you get it right. Operate in good faith, and, you know, negotiate something that both sides can agree to, I think is helpful. Be bipartisan, right? Which is what Nico said.
Dennis, would it be safe to say that the Elizabeth Warren camp specifically is taking advantage of the news that it was coming out of Trump specifically, and they're weaponizing it in a way to slow down the bill. Would that be a safe assumption to make?
That some Democrats are?
Specifically, let's be specific here, the Elizabeth Warren camp.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they don't even meet with anybody. So, I mean, it's hard to even really tell what's going on over there. I have some friends over there that know them that I'm trying to break the ice with. But yeah, arguably you could say that because they don't even think that crypto is like legitimate. They don't think, and that includes Bitcoin. So I use the word crypto a lot here because it's, all this regulations and these bills they're covering the crypto, writ large space. But they don't even think anything about crypto, including Bitcoin, is legitimate. So so like maybe like you could argue maybe in some ways like they'd be fine with regulations if they were like 1,000 times stronger and 1,000 times more punitive and would ultimately like destroy like 99.999% of the space. So if their amendments were accepted during the markup process in the Senate hearing that happened last month, maybe they could get on board. But the current version of Clarity, yeah, I mean they don't want it to pass. They don't like it at all. They want nothing to do with it.
So, and just so it's on the record.
You're okay with it, Dennis. You're okay with the existing Clarity Act yourself.
I mean, like it's got problems. Like I'm not a big fan of the way that they determine whether something is a commodity in the House version. I think this idea of like basing something on how decentralized it is like equivalent to like whether or not it's a commodity is interesting. The problem with that is that basically any protocol or any project in the space can just change their code so they become more decentralized, so they meet the minimum threshold, which allows them to essentially choose their own regulator. I don't think you should be able to choose your own regulator when you come, trying to do financial products. So that's an area where I have concern. Senate version with the ancillary asset component, they can self-declare, and I can't remember what the clock is, but it's like incredibly short. It's like 30 days or something like that. Within 30 days, like the SEC has to rebut, and if they don't, then it's more or less you become a commodity. Same. But it's like, would there be a better solution? I personally think there's, I have a better solution, but I got a little late to DC, so we'll see if we can shop it 5 years from now.
Well,
gentlemen,
it's very complex. It's very complex. So, Dennis, what would be the simple two things someone would put in a letter to send to my congressman, woman? What would be the two things? I support the Clarity Act, and B, I support a Bitcoin ecosystem, and I should put that in my letter. What would you think would have the influence? A short, concise, but comprehensive enough without getting all the granularity you're talking about.
Yeah, if you want Clarity to pass, I mean, just a short letter saying you support it and that you agree with good faith negotiations around BRCA and ethics. I mean, those
Dennis,
are the two areas.
Let's say that someone has never written a letter before. What's a good resource where they can look online and say, okay, this is the address that I'm supposed to send my letter to. This is how I should structure my letter. What's a good resource for them?
There's plenty of websites you can go to, like look up my lawmaker. Like you'll find like 10 Google responses to that. Look up your lawmaker. You'll type in your address. They'll show you who your lawmakers are. You'll be able to find their emails, relatively easily from that. It's all publicly available information. You send an email, have it come from your personal email account. Say, hey, thank you so much. I'm a constituent. I live in the district. I support Clarity, and I believe that it's important to have a bipartisan support. And so we agree that there should be good faith negotiations around Section 604, Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, and ethics provisions. I mean, there's another outstanding issue aside from that letter, which is the CFTC. There's only a chair there. There's no commissioners. There's no Democrat appointees. So that's another issue they need to work on. But that doesn't matter for the letter. That's not that important.
So that's the call to action, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be working with Dennis behind the scenes. I'm gonna templatize this, so you guys have a template. You can write your own personal thoughts, I'll send
go
ahead,
of
Frank.
my letters. I'll send you a letter that I've crafted.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it. So I'm going to work with Dennis, and Frank's going to give me some inspiration as well, and I'm going to templatize it for you guys, so you guys have absolutely no excuse but to write to your representatives. Remember, this is a movement. You have to get involved. Don't ask what Bitcoin could do for you. Ask what you could do for Bitcoin. So this is the call to action. And remember Saul Alinsky's own words, keep up the pressure. And we must do that as a community. Dennis Porter, Frank Holmes, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We really appreciate it. Frank, enjoy the Colombia game. Let's go Colombia.
Yay, thank you.
Appreciate
Have fun
it.
with the wife out there, man. That'll be great.
And let's make sure the U.S. wins too today.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Really appreciate it.
See you.
All right, everybody, you guys heard it, right? It's valuable. It's valuable. You have to get involved. The most important vote you can make, of course, is taking your Bitcoin into self-custody. That's number one. But the second most important vote you could make is obviously you want pro-Bitcoin, anti-CBDC representatives representing your bags. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. I see everybody criticizing this and saying, oh, you know, these politicians aren't perfect and it's whatever. It's humanity. What do you expect? It's Washington, D.C. Of course, it's not going to be perfect. But if you compare and contrast to where we were last year, where our industry was getting people were getting arrested, literally, compared to where we are today, we've definitely made progress, and that's how politics works. It's a messy, slow process where obviously people's different incentives clash, right? So as a community, I think we're big enough. I would make the argument that our community is what got Trump elected. And if you put everything else aside, right, everything else aside, all his policies of whatever, you could say that the Bitcoin community got Ross Ulbricht free because they got Trump elected. And that's enough for me. That's enough for me. Just that by itself is enough for me. Not to mention all the other stuff with the executive orders, the end of Operation Choke Point 2.0. We have a pro-Bitcoin administration. All of those are, you know, cherries on the top. It's bonuses. So we have to remember the mission. We have to remember why we're here. And your voice counts. It really does. So the more of us get involved, the more of us we get involved in this movement, the higher probability that, again, we have pro-Bitcoin politicians that are representing your bags. But remember, take self-custody. That's the most important thing you could do. Second thing is get involved. Get involved, ladies and gentlemen. All right, everybody, we're going to be right back just after the break. We're going to go through some of these comments, the appropriate ones, and then we're going to wrap up the show. We're going to be right back just after the break. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy across 3 continents, HIVE runs dual engines, Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Their AI platform is ranked #1 in the world for network performance, and it's doing something bigger than compute. It's accelerating human discovery, the science, the breakthroughs, pushing humanity further and faster. Listed on the NASDAQ with the ticker HIVE. Catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech on X or HIVEdigitaltech.com.
You secured your Bitcoin, but did you secure your devices too? They're still broadcasting your location and digital footprint. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell, 5G, EMF, all of it is leaking. Escape Zone fixes that. Their Faraday bags block every signal your device emits, so you decide when you're detectable, not the grid. Built for Bitcoiners who know sovereignty isn't just your wallet. It's your phone, your hardware wallet, your keys, and your entire digital life. Go to escapezone.com/simply and use code SIMPLY for 10% off. That's escapezone.com/simply, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, let's get through some of these comments and see what everybody is thinking. Of course, have to be PG-13, ladies and gentlemen. Bitcoin is the escape, safety from the system. I would agree. I would say, you know, at the end of the day, you know, Bitcoin and self-custody is the most powerful vote you can make. But again, on a jurisdictional level, you obviously want to live Illinois Bitcoin. And, you know, Illinois, one of the most hostile jurisdictions towards Bitcoin. You have Governor Pritzker basically floating the idea. I think it's already in law, actually, where every transaction is going to be taxed. I think it's like 3% or something like that. Something crazy, right? Even despite you having self-custody. Only in the U.S. or whole world? 100%. This is a whole world movement. 1,000,000%. This is not just the United States. You guys know the Clarity Act will accelerate institutional Bitcoin adoption, correct? 100%. Listen, there's two things. Does the Clarity Act Does Bitcoin need the Clarity Act to pass? No. But will the Clarity Act provide, no pun intended, clarity for Bitcoin entrepreneurs, Bitcoin businesses, institutions in the United States? 100%. And that is bullish from a number go up perspective. Let's keep going. Self-custody, 100%. Truth wins, 100%. USA, let's make some goals today. Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for the show. It's going to be great. Solid show. Very good. Thank you, America. America, man. We got to see the fireworks and the drone show. First time we saw a drone show in Miami for the 4th of July. It was pretty cool. I was here with Opti and some friends, and we were having hot dogs and burgers and all of that stuff. Use a non-custodial wallet and run a node, 100%. Bitcoin will not be separate from the act. No, unfortunately, that's the way kind of legislation works. It's all kind of grouped together, just the way that the system works. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Very astute. I'm going to pull it up on screen. I'm not going to read it, though. Then yes, I agree. Let's pretend politicians are writing the rules for the act. That's not the way it works. Yes, some politicians definitely chime in, but it's interest groups that have a lot of influence in the wording of the act. So of course it's the Bitcoin/crypto interest groups, and that's really being led by Brian Armstrong, if we're being honest. And then of course there's the banking industry interest groups, right? And they've had a lot to say. So let's. How about creating a form that can be sent to Congress members, short, sweet, and to the point, a place for a personal note, how it affects the person? 100%. 100%. That's a phenomenal idea. I completely agree. Last comment, then we're going to wrap it up today. Nico, can you talk about how this cycle is very different, even though it follows the 4-year cycle? We front run the halving, and it seems like the lowest volatility versus. Okay, so the reason that this cycle is different from the previous cycles is in 2021, we had a double top. I would make the argument that double top was caused by the China mining ban. So if you look at the hash rate and the price, there's a direct correlation between the hash rate going down and the price going down. And I believe that's because the miners had to sell Bitcoin in order to relocate to a more favorable jurisdiction. This is why the people that say that voting isn't important, I call BS. Yes, self-custody, most important vote. Second, you want to have a jurisdiction that is favorable to Bitcoin, especially if you live on a Bitcoin standard. And then this particular cycle, what happened was that I believe most of the gains that occurred happened earlier on. So this is the first cycle that we reached an all-time high before the halving. And then most of the alpha that we saw in Bitcoin was in 2023 and 2024. That's when most of the price gains occurred. 2025, we had some gains, but it was a relatively flat year, so to speak, in Bitcoin terms. So this cycle, what's playing out is we've had less volatility, especially to the downside. Of course, the bear market isn't over, in my opinion. We could have more downward volatility, but compared to previous cycles, we would have 50% swings in a day, right? So I would say that the things that are different is that the volatility is lower, which makes sense. It's a higher market cap asset. It's a more global asset. Wall Street is involved. And I would say that, again, we had kind of this euphoric top that happened in January of 2025, and then we had the price top that happened in October of 2025. So we had two totally different tops. Like if you look at the fear and greed index, the greed index maxed out in January of 2025, what I call the euphoric top. That's when Saylor was throwing a 100K party. That's when President Trump got elected into office. And then you had the actual price top in October, but the fear and greed index, the greed index was all the way to the greed side in January. It wasn't in October. All right, so moving on. Why didn't Saylor borrow against his stack? I mean, I would say that would be burying a deeper hole for himself.
Add some leverage on top of your leverage with a little more leverage to sprinkle.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Also, it's probably like that's a lot of cash.
So, question: when 100K? No one knows for certain. Anyone
Senior Gringo Poppy's been asking this for a year and a half.
Anyone who tells you they know the answer to this question is lying. No one knows for sure. All I can tell you is infinity divided by 100.
I know the answer soon.
21 million. What I will tell you is I fully expect Bitcoin to be above 100K back in 2027 when this all gets cleared out. Let's see any more. No, it says, someone says, this is an opinion by Walter Sheen's Clarity Act will not pass. Banks and politicians don't want it. I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that for sure.
What's the Zoo Studio says 100K before 2030. I'll bet you on it.
All the attacks on Simply Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, listen, when we talk about when we talk about unpopular things,
it's just the media game.
It's just the media game, but it's important. Listen, guys, at the end of the day, if we don't talk about this, who else will? Right? Like, who else is going to talk? Do you think mainstream media is going to talk about this? No. Perhaps maybe some other Bitcoin shows might talk about this, but this isn't something that people are going to talk about. So us, as a Bitcoin-only media organization, it is our responsibility to talk about things like this. Let's see. Moonboy chat.
2028 is when we eat good.
Simply painful. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. All right, everybody. Well, if you guys enjoyed today's show, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Consider subscribing to Simply Bitcoin. We love you all. Appreciate you all. Don't forget to get your tickets to one of the largest Bitcoin mining events in the world. It's called Mining Disrupt. It's in 2026. It's July 21st through the 23rd. So it's this month. It's coming up. Get your tickets now. Use promo code SimplyBitcoin to get 20% off your tickets. We'll see you guys at Mining Disrupt in Miami, Florida, July 21st through the 23rd. You're not going to want to miss it. Scan the QR code or check the link in the video/podcast description. We love you all. Appreciate you all. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.